Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today is day 17, the last Tuesday of spoiler season for the Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy expansion, and we got a ton of cards today, probably the most cards that we've gotten in a single day ever since the debut, because they actually dumped the entire common dump on us today, which is kind of weird because they normally wait until the very last spoiler day to dump all of the rest of the commons on us in what we commonly refer to as the common dump. I said common way too many times. In any case, it's weird that we're getting it early. Normally we get all of the leftover commons and maybe one rare in the very last day of spoiler season, and I'm pretty sure spoiler season doesn't end until the 30th, so we have a few more days left. And they're basically doing the common dump now. But that means we have way too many cards to get through, and I'm going to try to do my best to get through them as quickly and efficiently as possible, not spending too much time on the commons so that we can get through everything in a reasonable amount of time. But there are a lot of exciting cards to go over, and I'm super stoked for it. So before we go on any further, make sure and hit that like button. It helps the channel grow. It helps the video get out to so many more people. And subscribe if you're new, because we do have more spoiler videos on the way. My top 10 of the set video, the 10 decks I'm interested in brewing video. I might even do an entire set review after the entire card set has been spoiled. The entire card database is available. Lots of crazy stuff still on the way, including deck techs and early access. I'll be doing a 24-hour stream, and I'll have information on that really soon, but we'll be making a ridiculous amount of crazy new standard legal decks with the Final Fantasy cards on Arena days before the public has access to them. I'm looking forward to all of that, but we have a lot of spoilers to get through today, so let's jump right in. First off, we're starting with Crossroads Village. This is a common land town. It enters tapped. As it enters, you choose a color, tap it to add a mana of the chosen color. So this is going to be one of your common ways of color fixing in your limited deck, so you can grab it and go into 2 or 3 colors and not have to worry too much. It is cool that it's a town. You're going to be able to link up all of your town synergies with this, and that will be really nice. Next up, we've got Adventurer's Airship, a 3/2 artifact vehicle with flying for 3 colorless mana. Whenever this vehicle attacks, draw a card and then discard a card, and it crews for only 2. Again, this isn't anything to write home about, but it is nice to see some vehicle support for archetypes that want to do that within Limited, and this being able to let you loot when it swings is cool because it's flying. It's a common flying vehicle, so it's going to be really easy to just get through with evasion with this, get a little bit of extra value. It'll probably fill out your curve in some decks that really want vehicles, but it's nothing super great. Next up, we've got 𝐽𝐻𝐻𝐾at, a 1/3 cat for 1 white and 2. It has flying, it has vigilance, and as long as you control 2 or more artifacts, this creature gets +2/+0. I believe this card is from Final Fantasy V. I like the flavor. I like that this basically becomes a 3/3 flying vigilance for 3, which is really nuts for a common, as long as you have the right hoops that you're jumping through. You just need 2 artifacts, but as soon as you have those 2 artifacts down, as long as you have them, this just turns on, and it's a 3/3 flying vigilance forever, which in Limited for 3 mana is really good, especially if you're picking up multiple of these since they're common, and you can probably grab them pretty late in the draft. So you definitely want to be in the right archetype where you're going wide with artifacts. Either that's the equipment deck or maybe some other kind of artifact deck archetype within Limited. But I think this card's going to be pretty decent, especially because equipment is pretty prevalent in this set, and you can actually equip the equipment to the 𝐽𝐻𝐻𝐾at, and it gives you this nice flying vigilance creature that gets beefed up by the equipment. I think it's actually pretty good for a common. Next up, we've got Aerith Rescue Mission. This is a sorcery for 1 white and 3, and you choose one. Either take the elevator to create 3 1/1 colorless hero creature tokens, love the flavor there, or take 59 flights of stairs. Tap up to 3 target creatures, put a stun counter on one of them. This card is perfection. If anybody remembers that scene from Final Fantasy VII, always take the stairs. I always take the stairs. But with the case of this card, I might not always take the stairs. I think both modes on this are really good. 4 mana is a lot, and probably the one thing that might keep this from seeing play in Standard. But even in Standard, it might see some play. I mean, pairing this with something like Caretaker's Talent, getting card draw off those 3/1/1s could be awesome, and having that extra versatility of dealing with your opponent's board state in the right situation could also be good. But 4 mana is still 4 mana, so I'm not entirely certain. Either way, this is going to be really good in Limited. It gives you a ton of value just at Common. It'll be easy to grab these later on in a draft. And again, the flavor is just spot on, and I love it. I absolutely love it. We have to think of some kind of a catchphrase or something to say flavorfully when we cast a card like this. If you can think of any ideas, let me know in the comments. But next up, we've got Rook Turret, a 3/3 artifact creature construct with flying for 1 blue and 3. Whenever another artifact you control enters, you may draw a card. If you do, you discard a card. So every single artifact entering loots for you, on top of it being a 3/3 flying body that counts as an artifact itself, helps contribute to other artifact synergies. All of that's pretty good for only 4 mana at Common. If this was like an uncommon or more, I would think it's a little but because you can pick this up later on in a draft, I kind of sound like a broken record. I keep saying that, but it's true. If you can pick this up pretty easily later on in a draft, if you notice you're low on flyers, or you need more artifact support, or if maybe your curve's not looking great and you need more 4-drops, it's really easy to have these readily available towards the end of a draft. Just grab them to fill out your deck, and you can do a lot worse than to have a 3/3 flyer that gives you some of this extra value. So I think it'll be pretty good in Limited. Next up, we've got Stuck in Summoner's Sanctum, an enchantment aura with flash for 1 blue and 2. It enchants an artifact or creature. When it enters, you tap Enchanted Permanent. Enchanted Permanent doesn't untap during its controller's untap step, and its activated abilities can't be activated. We already saw a card like this, which I believe was called Sleep, or something with Sleep in the name, but it was only 1 mana. I forget what the stipulations were on that card, but I'm pretty sure that card could only hit a creature. This can hit an artifact, and it's a common, so this is just sort of filling up that necessary, obligatory removal slot in common for blue. You're not going to want to necessarily grab this, but if you're light on removal in your deck and you're getting towards the end of a draft, you could do a lot worse than to at least grab a copy of this, or maybe 2, to make sure you can flesh out your removal suite, and that's mostly what it will be used for. Next up, we've got Ahriman, a 2/2 eye horror with flying and death touch for 1 black and 2. I already love it at Common, honestly, with that stat line, but you can also pay 3 mana, sacrifice another creature or artifact to draw a card. This is one of the best commons in this set. Absolutely. A 2/2 flying death touch for 3 is already pretty good, right? It's already strictly better than a Drake because of the death touch. But the fact that you have this built-in way of sacrificing literally any creature or artifact to draw a card over and over and over again, as long as you have the 3 colorless mana, this is a sacrifice outlet, this is a card draw engine, this is a flying win condition, this is a blocker that kills any big bomb that tries to swing in, even if it swings in the air. It does all of that as a common. I absolutely love this card. You have to tell me in the comments if I'm over-evaluating it, because, like, maybe? But I don't think I am. I think this card is the real deal. I don't think it's good enough to see play in Standard, because that activation to draw a card and sack something, 3 mana is just way too much, and the body doesn't make up for that in a format like Standard at all, where things are just so pushed and so powerful. But in Limited, I think this card is absolutely bonkers. Probably the best common in black, if I had to guess off the top of my head. It's just that good. I believe this is actually from Final Fantasy III, but the one that I remember the most vividly is actually the boss in one of the dungeons in Final Fantasy XIV. So if you remember that boss, let me know in the comments. That was super fun. Next up, we've got Cornered by Black Mages. You see a bunch of mages here that look like Vivi. This is obviously from Final Fantasy IX. A sorcery for 2 black and 1. Target opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. So it's a Diabolic Edict that costs 1 extra black mana, but it has another ability. and that ability is create a 0/1 Black Wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. I actually think this card is really, really good. Like, no matter what, you 2-for-1. It's an automatic 2-for-1 that's relatively decently costed for being an automatic 2-for-1 at common, right? Granted, the body it gives you isn't anything super insane, but there's a lot of different ways you can use that body. This is a set that has a lot of equipment in it. Just having any body at all gets way better in a set with a lot of equipment, because you can always have potentially something really valuable to attach to it and turn it into a sizable threat. It's also just really good in the non-creature spell decks that are trying to either go wide with wizards to do a bunch of damage when you cast non-creature spells, or maybe having some of the other non-creature spell payoffs that we've seen in this set already outside of that, of which there are a number. It can be helpful for that as well, and it can also just be helpful in sacrifice or aristocrat style decks, which we absolutely know is going to be a limited archetype in this. It's super pushed, seeing as we got Sephiroth, which is one of the best cards for a deck like that I think we've ever seen. So there are a lot of different ways you can use that 0/1 token. I think because of that, it makes that extra board presence that much more meaningful, while also, no matter what, getting rid of a threat on the opponent's side. Sure, they get to choose what goes, but if you cast this early on in the game, they might not have very great choices. Or maybe if you follow up some kind of a pseudo sweeper like a pyroclasm effect with this, they lose all their little guys, and now they have to sacrifice their big dude. There's a lot of ways to line up situations where you can take advantage of edict effects to a greater degree. You can absolutely do that with this and get the extra value of the wizard. I think this card is nuts for a common. I mean, it's still not really, really good. Like, I don't know if it makes the cut in standard. I think there is a small chance it could make the cut in standard, but either way, I think this is really good for a common and limited. Next up, we got Hect Eyes, a 1/1 ooze horror for 1 black and 1, and when it enters, each opponent discards a card. The most notable part about this is we're actually getting like a burglar rat style card that counts as an ooze and counts as a horror. The creature types are the thing that might matter, and out of the two, I think the ooze creature type is what matters the most. So if we end up getting some kind of an ooze tribal deck in the future, this could have a little bit of upside being a burglar rat, but still fitting into those ooze tribal synergies. I don't really think that's the case. I think this is mainly meant for limited, and it's going to be desirable as, you know, a filler creature in certain archetypes, like Sacrifice, where you get the ability and then you have this crappy body that you don't mind sacrificing for benefit in decks that want to sacrifice things, stuff like that. So I think it could be cool and still useful in the right limited deck. Next up, we've got 𝐽𝑡𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑛𝑐𝑒 𝑅𝑜𝑟𝑏𝑎𝑐ℎ. Not 𝐽𝑡𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑏, 𝐽𝑡𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑏. 𝐽𝑡𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑏 for a 3/2 zombie horror for 1 black and 2. And when it enters, you choose one. Destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn, or exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. This guy's also really good for commons. One of the things I'm noticing about sets more and more as we get deeper into the new way that Standard has been with a 3-year rotation and the play boosters and all of that, is the common rarity cards are getting better and better. And this, having the versatility of being able to either kill something that was dealt damage or exiling 2 cards from a single graveyard, just that choice of either or just makes the card better in and of itself. The fact that sometimes you're going to be able to line this up to 2-for-1 your opponent, you know, maybe you swing in with a crappy little 1/1, your opponent decides to chump or block your guy rather, and then you play the 𝐽𝑡𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑏𝑐ℎ for air. That's such a hard name to pronounce. 𝐽𝑡𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑏𝑐ℎ. Sounds like I'm saying fray, like a frayed string. Forayer. 𝐽𝑡𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑏𝑐ℎ for air. But yeah, it's also a zombie. Could theoretically work in zombie tribal decks. I think this is another card that's mainly meant for limited, seeing that it's common. But like I said, the versatility here is good. It's kind of like a charm attached to a body, which is kind of okay on rate, decently on rate with 3 power as a 3-drop. I love everything about that. There are also a lot of cards in this set that care about the graveyard, whether it's flashback stuff or whatever the case may be. So being able to hit relevant cards out of your opponent's graveyard is going to end up mattering a lot more than it might seem right now. So there's a lot of versatility in this, and I really like it. Next up, we've got Resentful Revelation, a sorcery for 1 black and 1. You look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard, and then it flashes back for 1 black and 6. This card is really interesting because this feels like a blue card. Like, you could have shown me this exact same card, except it was blue, and cost 1 blue and 1, and flashed back for 1 blue and 6. Even the dog's questioning it, right? And I wouldn't have given it a second glance. It would have made perfect sense to me. But it being in black is super interesting. Are they messing with the color pie now? Are they pushing into black for these type of effects? I guess because it puts the rest into the graveyard, that's the part of it that maybe pushes a little bit more towards black, which is really, really nice if you're playing, you know, with a bunch of cards that potentially have flashback like this one does. Just filling up your graveyard with extra gas while also finding the things you want seems nice. And then you get double the value out of this because it has flashback itself. So I actually think this card is really good. I keep saying that, but for a common, this is going to give you some pretty good value in the right decks in Limited. And again, it's one of those cards that I could offhand see this seeing play in Standard, in the right deck. In some kind of, I don't know, maybe like an Oculus deck or something, where you want to dig for the things you want to put maybe sorceries in the yard, you want to put things like Oculus in the yard. You know, you can maybe find your Helping Hand or your Recommission with the Resentful Revelation, and also put the Oculus in the graveyard at the same time with the same card. All of that seems kind of good. So I don't know, there is an outside chance this could see play in Standard, for sure. But in the right archetype in Limited, it's going to be great. Next up, we've got 𝐽𝐼𝑔𝐻𝑒, a 5/4 giant with Trample and Haste for 2 red and 4. And he has Mountain Cycling for 2. This guy's from Final Fantasy VI. I remember the image. It's kind of iconic. Super cool. I love that they're using him as a way to get the basic land cycler at common for red. It seems like a perfect fit, a way to fit in some interesting flavor into the set while, you know, getting the functionality that you need in order to have your cycle of basic land cyclers. But this one is pretty good in that if you don't need to mountain cycle it, you can just top deck it later on in the game, and if you have enough mana, it just comes out of nowhere and smashes your opponent in the face. So I really like this one. I think it's gonna see play out of the entire cycle. This is one of the better ones, I think. But next up, we've got Call the Mountain Chocobo, a sorcery for 1 red and 3. Search your library for a mountain card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters, this token gets +1/+0 until end of turn. There is so much to love about this. Also, it has flashback for 1 red and 5. There is so much to love about this. First of all, getting another 2/2 token that triggers off of landfall while you're also searching for a land to enable that landfall trigger is awesome. And there are a ton of chocobos and some other cards that aren't chocobos that get value off of landfall. So that mountain that you're searching for is probably going to do a lot more in the decks that want this card than just trigger the landfall on that 1/2/2. You're probably going to get a ton of value out of it. And then you can flash it back, get a second one, find another mountain, and trigger both of them in addition to all of your other landfall triggers. And that seems great too. But the part about this card that's the easiest to overlook that I think is really important is it doesn't search for a basic mountain. It just searches for a mountain. So if you're using dual lands or special lands that technically have the mountain land type, you can still find it with Call the Mountain Chocobo. And I don't know if that's relevant in Limited. It probably isn't. And I think this card is mainly meant for Limited. But because of that, I do think a card like this has the outside chance of potentially seeing play in Standard or other constructed formats. Even though 4 mana is a little bit expensive, the fact that you get the board presence and the land and it flashes back, and the mountain can be any mountain, doesn't have to be a basic, all of that put together does at least give it a chance of being valuable in the right decks where you really want to find just the right lands and go off with maybe some landfall triggers. I just love that it adds the board presence as well. I think the Chocobo deck is going to be really, really awesome. And there's a chance a card like this could see play in something like that. But next up, we've got Blazing Bomb, a 1/1 elemental for 1 red mana. I remember these guys. They're obnoxious. You have to kill them as quick as possible, or they blow up and nuke your face. Let's see if they got the flavor right. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and then it has the blow up ability. Tap, sacrifice this creature, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature, activate only as a sorcery. This is awesome. I love this so much. I feel like this is like the closest we've gotten to like a Flametongue Kavoo style card in a long time. The fact that this can come down, be board presence that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time, coming down on as early as turn 1 because it's just a 1-drop, and then eventually can also double as being removal when you get it big enough. In fact, I wonder if mono red decks in Standard might give this guy a try. I think this might have a chance at seeing play in mono red decks, or potentially even 2-color aggro decks in Standard. Just, you know, buff them up with some kind of a monstrous rage or whatever cheap buff spell, and then sack it to kill their big blocker so that the rest of your team can swing in. And maybe mono red doesn't want to quite operate at that speed, that slow of a speed. It probably wants to be faster, not worry about getting rid of that blocker. But there's still potential. I think the more interesting part of this is there a quick and efficient way that we can give Blazing Bomb Vigilance? Because if that's the case, we buff up the Blazing Bomb, we get to swing with it, do damage, and then still tap it, sack it, do more damage after swinging with it. That could be really cool, although it is important to note that you can only target a creature with the blow up ability, so you can't just throw it at your opponent's head like the mice in Standard right now. But all in all, I actually think this is really good, especially when you consider we're still looking at the commons here. This is just a common. I think it's going to be super fun and limited, just getting some board presence down early that eventually becomes a very relevant creature removal card. I think that's going to be great. I like this card. Next up, we've got my Cidian Elder, a 1/3 human wizard for 1 red and 2. And when he enters, you create a 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is exactly the card I was waiting for. And even though the body isn't great for 3 mana, getting 2 bodies for 1 card at common, being a card that you can get multiple copies of, you can probably pick up easy, makes a card like this really, really awesome in Limited. And again, those black wizard tokens are useful in multiple different archetypes, whether it's the non-creature spell archetype, or a sacrifice archetype, or equipment archetype as just another body to like stack your equipment on. There's a lot you can use those wizards for. I really want to build a wizard tribal deck that functions almost like a sacrifice or aristocrat style deck, where all of your bodies get you this damage when they die, except we're not getting the damage when they die. We're getting the damage by casting non-creature spells and just keep putting more and more wizards out and keep casting more non-creature spells to get more damage and more damage with every single one, and just try to win that way. It's like, to me, it's like almost a new take on aristocrats or sacrifice style decks without having to like kill your own stuff. I just find it really interesting. I'm going to try to build that in Standard, and this is just another card that adds support to that. I don't necessarily think this one is good enough for Standard, but I love seeing more cards that add to that archetype because it gives me more hope that we can actually build it. Next up, we've got Red Mages Rapier. Red Mages Rapier, an artifact equipment for 1 red and 1. It has Job Select, so it's going to make a 1/1 colorless hero creature token when it enters, and then become attached to that token for free. Otherwise, it equips for 3 colorless mana, and the equipped creature has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and that creature is a wizard in addition to its other types. So essentially, you have a 2 mana 1/1 that has like the Slick Shot Show Off buff ability, and then if it dies, you can just equip this to anything you want, and turn anything into a slick shot show off. That is terrifying. I do think if people are evaluating it like that and seeing it like that, oh, it's a build your own slick shot, I think they are going to be overlooking the fact that you have to pay the equip cost of 3 every time you do that, and having to pay that much mana to turn something into a slick shot is going to put you behind on tempo. And the whole reason slick shot is as good as it is because of how aggressively costed it is, and it can just keep doing its thing without investing a ton of mana into it. So I don't necessarily think, even though it looks on the surface like, oh, this is a build your own slick shot, I don't necessarily think it's quite that good. That being said, it is still really good because it comes attached to a creature, right? It's a slick shot on the ground right out of the gate. It doesn't have the haste, doesn't have the flying, but it's still going to get the +2 buff, not just the +1 buff, which is super relevant. And then if they kill the creature, it leaves behind this value where you can attach it to whatever you want. It's another really good card to put on, I don't know, a wizard token. You equip this to one of those wizard tokens, all of a sudden you play a non-creature spell, it becomes a 2/1 instead of a 0/1, and it pings your opponent. I don't know, everything about this seems cool to me. I'm excited to draft it and try it and just see how good it is in Limited. It might even make the cut in Standard, and I feel like I'm saying that a lot. I feel like a broken record, but it could. It probably won't, but it could. Next up, we've got Sabotender, a 2/1 plant with reach for 1 red and 1, and it has the landfall ability. Whenever a land you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. So we have another way to ping here. Could we maybe just load up an entire deck with like every possible way to ping, and just everything pings our opponent? That could be super fun. I like that this is a plant. You could theoretically make some kind of weird Jund Insidious Roots deck, and Sabotender will get +1/+1 counters every time you trigger the Insidious Roots, which is cool. It's a reach creature, so it's a way to have a big plant that gets bigger that can block flyers. I don't think that's super relevant. I think this is mainly for Limited. And in Limited, I actually think it's really good. It can go in the Chocobo deck. You can get value off all the landfall shenanigans, as well as pinging them every time you do it. And it's a decent little body, being a 2/1 reacher for only 2. You could do a lot worse at the common rarity than something like this, so I really like it. I'm pretty sure this guy's also from Final Fantasy XI. I only played a little bit of that game, so I don't remember vividly, but I feel like this guy is Final Fantasy XI. If you know, let me know in the comments. Next up, we've got Thunder Magic. This is one I've been waiting to see. An instant for just 1 red mana, and it has tiered. So you can pay an extra 0 mana to cast Thunder and deal 2 damage to target creature. So at its base level, it's just a shock. Isn't that already good at only the common rarity? It's just shock. Well, I guess it only hits a creature, so it's not just shock, right? But it is still instant speed, which is important. You can cast Thundara by spending an extra 3 mana, so a total of 1 red and 3, and it deals 4 damage to target creature, so you can kill a much bigger threat, but it's going to be a little overcosted to do it at a total of 4 mana. Or you can spend a whopping 7 mana, 2 red and 5, to cast Thundaga and deal 8 damage to target creature. It still only deals it to 1 target. You're not like sweeping the board or anything, and 7 mana is a lot for that. But the thing to keep in mind is it's instant speed. You can do it on your opponent's turn. You can do it as a combat trick. You can hold up other instant speed stuff. And then if you don't have anything better to do, cast this. Instant speed is super important. And the other thing to note is the fact that this is a common. So you shouldn't really expect something as crazy as like a sweeper or something like that for the 7 mana. The fact that a common can scale up and be this crazy, deal with a huge bomb if you have the extra money, is kind of good enough on its own. I think this is absolutely one of the better commons we've seen. Probably going to be one of the most sought after commons in draft in red. So if you're in red and you see this, you should probably just grab it because it's not going to table. Next up, we've got Airship Crash. 1 green and 2 for an instant. It has cycling for 2 colorless mana, or if you cast it, you destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. This is pretty cool. It's kind of like Broken Wings, but the big difference here is it's got the cycling. So you actually don't have to be worried about main decking this as much, because even if you don't have a target for it, which is probably unlikely, given that equipment are artifacts, and this is equipment-based set, and summons are enchantments, sagas, and they're prevalent in this set, and creatures with flying are all over the place. But even if you can't use it in your main deck, you can just cycle it away, try to draw something else, and replace it with another card. So the opportunity cost at including something like this in your main deck is actually super, super low. Very, very low. And I kind of love that, because I always have a hard time with something like the normal versions of this card that don't cycle, that we see every set. Trying to decide whether I should main deck them or not. I'm always on the fence about it, and this makes it a lot easier to not have to worry about that. Also, the flavor is just awesome, because I remember this scene from Final Fantasy IX and the plants chasing you and everything, and it was pretty wild. It's pretty iconic. It happens kind of early in the game. You crash into the forest. But next up, we've got Bards Bow, an artifact equipment for 1 green and 2. It has Job Select, so it's going to make a 1/1 colorless hero creature token when you first play it, and this will become attached to it for free. Otherwise, you have to use the Perseus's Bow ability to equip it for 6 colorless mana, which is an absolute metric ton. But you got to remember, it is a common equipment. So usually the common equipments like this are meant to be relatively on rate for what you get when you first play it, but then really, really expensive to change it to another creature. We see that a lot. The equipped creature gets +2/+2 reach and is a bard in addition to its other types. So it's basically a 3 mana 3/3 reach that leaves behind value if they kill the creature, which is pretty good. Equipping for 6 mana is not pretty good, but you can't really ask for much more when you consider the fact that it's a common. At common, I think it's really good. It helps you go wide with more artifacts while also having a creature. It gives you 2 permanents for 1 card. There is a lot of value baked into this, even though it's only a common, and even though that equip cost is insanely expensive. So I actually think it's pretty good. But next up, we've got Chocoo Kick, 1 green and 1 for a sorcery, and it has Kicker. Return a land you control to its owner's hand. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. If this spell was kicked, the creature you control deals twice that much damage instead. This is all sorts of good. Most people are going to see that kicker cost and evaluate it as a downside, but we already know that landfall decks are going to be very prevalent. Chocobos tend to deal with a lot of landfall triggers as an archetype, so sometimes returning a land to your hand is actually a benefit, because you might not have any more lands to play. Now you can return a land to your hand and get the opportunity to replay it to re-trigger all of your landfall abilities. Not only that, but we've seen a cycle of rare lands that have adventures attached to them. So you could cast the adventure, then play the land from exile, then cast Chocoo Kick, kill your opponent's dude, return that land to your hand, replay the adventure, and then replay the land, and get all of the landfall triggers off both times you play the land. Like, that could be absolutely nuts. So if you really think about the archetypes within this set in Limited, this card's actually kind of nuts. It's actually really, really good if you're in the right deck. You want to scoop these up as much as you can, as quick as you can, and run as many as you can in the landfall deck where landfall matters. It's probably also the Chocobo deck. I even think a card like this might be worth playing in Standard if that deck ends up being real in Standard, because there's just so much value to be had in turning a downside into an upside in the right circumstances. And I just love everything about this card, especially the art. Look at him. He's adorable. But next up, we've got Gigan Toad, a 4/4 frog for 1 green and 3. As long as you control 7 or more lands, this creature gets +2/+2. This guy is from Final Fantasy 15. He was annoying. But a 4 mana 4/4 that just all of a sudden just becomes a 6/6 because at some point is really good as a common. Are you noticing a trend? All of these commons seem better than commons should be. They're still not quite like... They're not quite so good that I think they should be uncommons or anything like that, but we are seeing a strict power increase to commons across the board in general from set to set, I feel. And this is a good example. A 4/4 for 4 is just good. And the fact that it's just going to be a 6/6 at some point just turn on without having to spend any mana or jump through any hoops. It's just when you finally get to 7 lands, it just becomes the thing. Everything about this is awesome. It's also a frog. Are frog tribal decks still a thing in Standard? I know they were in 𝔽𝕝𝕟𝕒. I don't know. I don't think that will matter, but it could. Next up, we've got Goooo Gardener. Goooo Gardener. They actually made the Goooo Gardener from Final Fantasy XI. That's wild. This is a 1/3 plant beast for 1 green and 1, and you can tap it to add a green mana. Also, if you hear snoring in the background, it's because my dog is asleep right next to me. He is tuckered out, and he snores worse than any human I have ever seen in my life. I wonder if he snores worse than the Goooo Gardener. Probably. I like this, though. As a common, it ramps you. It doesn't really color fix you, but theoretically it could kind of in some situations, right? If you only have 1 green source, if you've got some cards in your deck that require 2, there are rare circumstances in which this will help color fix you, but it's mostly meant to ramp you, right? And be a decent defending body early in the game. I just think it's a really good card at common. I think you want a card like this at common, and you don't always get a card like this at common. I think he's pretty cool. But next up, we've got Grand Pulse Ochu, a 1/1 plant beast for 1 green mana with Death Touch, and you can pay 8 colorless mana, and until end of turn, this creature gets +1/+1 for each permanent card in your graveyard. I love this. Comes down early. Your opponent doesn't want to attack with anything too good because you're just going to get rid of it for the price of 1 crappy little 1-drop, right? But then later on in the game, if this thing is still alive, and you have a ton of lands out, it's the late game, you don't really have anything to cast because you ran out of gas. Now you have this huge power sink, mana sink rather, and you just swing in and do a metric ton of damage if they don't block it, or even if they do block it. But a lot of times it'll be so big they can't just trade with it, and whatever they block it with will die no matter what because of the Death Touch. So it's good early as a blocker, it's good really late as potential game ender. And I think it gets a little bit better than people will first evaluate it at when you realize there's a lot of ramping mechanics within this set, a lot of landfall shenanigans that tie into the ramp, excuse me, the ramp mechanics. And so I think it's a little bit easier to get to that 8 colorless mana to activate that ability than it would be in other sets where there isn't as much of that ramp. So I actually think this card's really good. It's one of the better commons we've seen. I think this might be my pick for best green common off the top of my head. It might not literally be when I sit down to finally do like a set review or something, but off the top of my head, this just seems really good. Next up, we've got Loret Scout. These guys, don't they belong on the moon? A 3/2 Rabbit Scout for 1 green and 2, and whenever another creature you control enters, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So nothing super crazy. But I do love the flavor. I love that they actually took the time to add a Loret into the game. If you guys played Final Fantasy XIV and made it far enough into the expansions in that game, the Loporets are on the moon. And I'm not going to say anything more than that, because that would be spoiling it. But they're adorable and awesome, and I love that a Loret made the cut as one of the cards. Next up, we've got Prish Wanderings. An instant, for 1 green and 2, you search your library for a basic land card or town card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. When you search your library this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Not bad for a common. Again, instant speed onto the battlefield. So it is a way to trigger landfall abilities on your opponent's turn. In fact, you could do it as a combat trick after they swing, get value off your landfall triggers, make your board presence more than your opponent thinks you have, and also put a +1/+1 counter on a creature to increase that board presence even more. So I think this is another card, I keep saying this, but this is another card that's better than it looks on the surface, because there's just so many ways to take advantage of doing this at instant speed as a combat trick with the counter and potential landfall triggers. I think people are going to underestimate a card like this, and they're going to swing in, and they're going to learn to respect it. That's for sure. Next up, we've got Lunatic Pandora. We're on to the colorless. This is a legendary artifact for 1 colorless mana. Pay 2, tap it to surveil 1, or pay 6, tap it, sacrifice it, destroy target non-land permanent. I love everything about this card. I don't know how good it is. It is very expensive to do the main thing you want to do with it, but there are a couple of nice silver lining value aspects to the card. The fact that it helps you go wide with another artifact for things that care about how many artifacts you have for just 1 mana. The fact that if you are in a deck that cares about the graveyard, that is trying to fill up the graveyard, you get the ability to surveil as you're waiting to get to the point where you have enough mana to remove a non-land permanent. Or even if you don't care about what you put in the graveyard, using that surveil to basically scry what you need to the top and make sure you're drawing better consistently is also kind of decent. That being said, all of that requires mana, and I don't know to what extent you'll be able to slow yourself down in order to get the most out of a card like this, or if it's going to mess with your tempo too much. So this is one of those cards that we're absolutely going to have to test in Limited before we know how good it is. I think there's some potential there, but it's really, really hard to know just how good it ends up being until we see it run in some drafts or some sealed events. Next up, we've got Iron Giant, a 6/6 artifact creature demon for 7 mana in the colors of nothing because it's colorless. It has Vigilance, it has Reach, it has Trample. I also love that it's a demon. The one thing I've noticed about this set is it's actually giving us an awful lot of demons. I think Unholy Annex is going to get a whole lot better after this set. Not necessarily because of this card, because it's probably too expensive. But I do think this is pretty good in Limited. It's a little expensive, but in the right deck that's trying to ramp, or maybe cross-pollinating the synergies of a ramp deck with like a landfall deck, where it's a little bit easier to get to a higher mana count a little bit earlier in the game. This can be a lot better, but I also just like that it's colorless, so you can splash it in whatever you want to splash it in and not have to worry about the colors. But mostly I just like that this is that damn demon from Final Fantasy 15 that I had to keep fighting, and he's awesome. I remember. The North doesn't forget. The North remembers. The North remembers? Man, it's been so long since I've watched Game of Thrones. The North remembers. Yeah. This is Monk's Fist, an artifact equipment for 2 colorless mana. It has Job Select, so it will make a 1/1 colorless hero creature token when you play it, and then become attached to it for free. Otherwise, it equips for 2 colorless mana, and it gives the equipped creature +1/+0, and it becomes a monk, in addition to its other types. So this is a 2 mana 2/1 that gives you 2 permanents for 2 colorless mana that, even if they kill the creature, leaves behind a little bit of extra value in the form of an artifact that can be equipped to another thing to give it a little power boost, and even if it isn't, potentially be sacrificed to certain sacrifice payoffs as fodder, or go wide with more artifacts on the battlefield to trigger artifact synergies that care about how many artifacts you have. So there's a lot of little silver lining pieces of value you can get out of a card like this that I think is awesome. And again, it's colorless, so you can splash it in anything. This is going to be one of those really good cards at helping to fill out your curve regardless of what colors you're in. If you're coming up short on 2-drops and you're getting towards the end of a draft and you realize it and you're panicking, anybody can grab this and just jam it and flesh out their curve with it. And I kind of love that. Yeah, this is cool. And I love that the monk class is represented. Next up, we've got Magic Damper. This is an instant for 1 blue mana. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains hexproof until end of turn. Untap it. Can you tell I'm tired? Can you tell that this is a long video and that I'm talking way too much for way too long? At least I have coffee. This card is great. It's basically Shore Up, right? It's Shore Up, except different. It's 1 mana instant, protect your dude, get extra value. It can be used in a lot of different ways, right? You can stop targeted removal. You can stop sweeper burn if you're 1 toughness away from surviving it. You can stop an attacker and maybe kill an attacker by using it as a trick to untap a really big blocker. There's a lot of versatility to a card like this. I think it's going to be really good, and it's going to make the cut in a lot of limited decks for sure. Next up, we've got Geisel Greens, a sorcery for 1 green and 1. Create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters. It gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And then this card has Flashback for 1 green and 6. I love everything about this card. It's a 2 mana 2/2 that gets bigger on landfall. but it's also a sorcery in your graveyard, and it's also something that you can use a second time later on to make another one. All of that is awesome at common. This card, definitely one of the better commons. This is going to see a lot of play. There's a lot of long-term value built into this card that gets even better if you're in the like landfall or chocobo deck, or in the deck that can utilize its graveyard more. Maybe you're surveilling things into the graveyard. You get access to flashing this back without ever having to draw the card, so you save yourself a card. A lot of different ways to take advantage of this card. I love it, and the flavor's awesome. Like, for those of you that don't know, in the Final Fantasy games, Geisel Greens are the thing you have to buy from shops to feed to chocobos to basically be able to ride them. It's done a little differently in each game, but normally it's basically like you capture a chocobo, or you tame it so that you can ride it with the Geisel Greens. And that flavor is perfectly represented here, so I kind of love it. Next up, we've got Scorpion Sentinel, the very first boss from Final Fantasy VII. I love this guy, and for anybody that's played Final Fantasy VII Remake, absolutely epic. They turned this boss fight into the craziest, most ridiculous, awesome thing I'd ever seen that I never expected, because the original boss fight in the original Final Fantasy VII was kind of normal, tame. You know, it was sort of your first introductory sequence to a boss, and then they just took the concept of it and cranked it up to 11 in Remake, and it became one of the most memorable boss battles in that entire game. Absolutely love it. He is a 1/4 artifact creature robot scorpion for 1 blue and 1, and as long as you control 7 or more lands, he gets +3/+0. So he just becomes a 4/4 when you have enough lands. I like that we're seeing that synergy carry over from card to card. We've already seen a card that does that. So there is sort of this archetype, it seems like, you can draft into, or get lucky enough to land in if you're in sealed, where once you get to 7 lands, you turn on some buffs for your creatures. And that seems really interesting. It's also super relevant that this is an artifact. There's lots of ways to utilize that. But I'm really interested at the fact that it has a creature type robot. We haven't seen a lot of those yet, but I do feel like they're sort of dipping their toe into preparing us for what's coming in the next set, because we've seen a couple robots, we've seen a couple aliens. The next set coming after Final Fantasy is Edge of Eternities, and that's going to be like a space opera style set. It's in the vein of something like Star Wars. It's going to be pretty crazy, I think. There's a part of me that's worried it's getting too far away from fantasy, but there's another part of me that's just insanely excited to see what a sci-fi set looks like in Magic, because I'm a huge sci-fi fan. So I'm excited to see what the heck they're doing with that set, but I'm going off on a tangent here. We're here to talk about Final Fantasy, but either way, that one's still going to be fun to finally see the first card spoiled. It's going to be a couple months, though. Scorpion Sentinel, he's prepping us. He's getting us ready to see a world where robots and aliens are in Magic. Really fun card. Next up, we've got our first uncommon. Finally, we made it through the entire common dump. This is Eden, Seat of the Sanctum. It's from Final Fantasy 13, I believe. It's a land town that taps for a colorless mana. It enters untapped, which is awesome. You can pay 5 mana, tap it, mill 2 cards. Then you may sacrifice this land. When you do, return another target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. There's a couple things I want to note about this. First of all, when you use the ability to mill, you don't have to wait until there's something you want to get back, a permanent you want to get back from the graveyard. You can just use this to mill. If you're in a deck that wants to self-mill because you have value you're trying to get into your graveyard, or some sort of interaction that you need to fill up your graveyard with, or fill up your graveyard for, you can just spend 5 mana every turn, mill 2 cards every turn, and not sacrifice this, which it is very overcosted, but as just like the offhand, like maybe use it that way as extra gravy, it is kind of cool to note that it can do that. The other thing that I want to point out is sometimes cards that work like this, they can only grab a permanent that was one of the 2 cards milled specifically. This can grab anything in your graveyard. So this is a land that eventually gets your best permanent back out of the graveyard, regardless of whether you care about the milling or not. That seems really good to me. I'm worried about running a colorless land in Limited, but it's possible that in the right constructed deck, in the right standard deck, this is actually worth running. Especially if the colorless deck ends up being a real thing in standard. We got Ugin in the last set who really wants colorless to be a thing in standard for sure. We've definitely seen at least a few cards that are continuing to push that as a potential archetype within standard. If that deck ever does end up being real, where the entire deck is colorless, you don't need any basic lands, you don't need any colored mana. Your entire mana base can be colorless lands that have extra value built into them because they're colorless. So you could add 4 copies of this and just have this kind of way to bring back your best permanents later on in the game at 0 opportunity cost, which could be really, really nuts. But I'm probably getting ahead of myself. It's probably way too early for a deck like that to exist. I think we're going to continue to see more support over the next few sets before we finally get to a card pool that has enough really good colorless support to go 100% colorless. But if we do ever get there, I think this card will be there. I think it'll be there as a full play set. Next up, we've got Swallowed by Leviathan, an instant for 1 blue and 2. Choose a spell, surveil 2, then counter the chosen spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. I mean, this is a really good counter spell. Not only can it scale and make your opponent have to pay more and more and more, but also don't forget about the fact that you're just getting access to extra incidental value in the form of that surveil. You know, getting to surveil 2 means you might hit something that you want to put in the graveyard because it has a flashback. You could also hit something that you want to make sure that you put on top so that you can draw it next turn when otherwise it might have been 2 cards down. So it gives you a lot of extra value that isn't just providing the surveil to make your opponent pay more. There's also a lot of incidental value you can have along with that surveil too. And then also make sure that you counter their spell in a way that scales as the game goes on. So I think a card like this is really awesome. How good is it? Hard to say until we play with it, but I think there's a lot of potential for this one to be nuts. Next up, we've got Thief's Knife. I'm glad we're getting like all of the equipment, all of the class equipment. We've seen like almost everything, even some of the deep cuts, and I love it. This is an artifact equipment for 1 blue and 2. It has job select, so it will make that 1/1 colorless hero creature token when it enters, and then become attached to it for free. Otherwise, it equips for 4 colorless. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and it also becomes a rogue in addition to its other types. This card is nuts. I don't know how good it ends up being in Constructed or in Commander, Standard, or anything like that, but in Limited, at the very least, this card is nuts. Get any creature that can draw you extra cards every time it hits for combat damage immediately goes up a little bit in value for Limited. It's just an easy way to get card advantage in Limited, which is normally a format that's not the easiest to get card advantage in. But this version of that type of effect is probably the best one we've ever got at a rarity that's lower than rare. Because if they kill your initial creature, or like if you swing into a trick and they end up able to block your thing and you don't get through like you thought you would and you don't get to draw a card, it still leaves behind the Thief's Knife. You just attach it to something else and you keep swinging and drawing cards. You know, if you have a little crappy flyer, now you just equip the Thief's Knife to your flyer and it's a lot harder for them to stop you from swinging in and drawing a card every turn. The fact that it's draw a card and not loot, not have to draw a card and then discard a card, is amazing. Like, this card is so good. If it didn't give you the automatic creature on the turn you play it, it would be a lot worse, because it would take so much more time to finally line up the ability to get through for damage and draw cards. But the fact that it just comes attached to a creature, you got a 2/2 that if they don't do something about it, you're potentially drawing cards the very next turn, but still leaves behind this value if they do something about it, so you can keep up with them tempo-wise. Everything about this card is just awesome, and I love it, and I want to play with it, and I'm very excited to do so. I will be doing so. But next up, we have Dark Knight's Greatsword. The hits just keep coming, man. This is an artifact equipment for 1 black and 2. Has that job select ability again. Otherwise, you have to equip it by using the Chaosbringer ability, which costs 3 life. and can only be used once each turn, which is pretty important. If you could just move this around for 3 life as many times as you want, potentially it could be nutty in like a life gain deck or something, but the equipped creature gets +3/+0 and is a knight in addition to its other types. So it's a 3 mana 4/1 that if it dies, you can equip to something else for no mana. For no mana, just paying 3 life, which granted, paying 3 life is still, you know, that's still something. You can't just do that as many times as you want. Eventually it will kill you, but still getting to equip this for 0 mana so that you can, you know, curve out and keep up with tempo and never have to slow down on playing your maximum amount of cards every single turn because you never have to worry about setting aside mana to equip this thing is kind of nuts. And the 4/1 for 3 itself can trade up and trade really well, leaving behind this equipment as extra value. Everything about this card is awesome. The fact that it turns into a knight as well. Knight is one of the more relevant creature types that we've seen in this set. Synergizes with things like Dion, Bahamut's Dominant, and Knights of the Round and stuff like that. Just awesome. I love this so much. It also helps that in Final Fantasy XIV, my main is a Dark Knight. So I absolutely love everything about this card. I started out as a Dragoon, which is the most fun to play single player, but not as fun to play in dungeons with other players. And then I started using Astrologian, the healer, as my dungeon class, because it's super fun being a healer in that game and constantly having to evaluate, like, do I have enough time to stop healing and get in some extra damage and cast some spells and stuff. It's just a really, really fun play style. But my favorite for both, my favorite class if I just want to be a class and be able to do both on the fly, is Dark Knight. I love being a tank when I'm playing with other players and saving them and pulling the aggro and the added responsibility of that. But even in solo, he's still super fun, almost as fun as the Dragoon to just like solo things and go toe-to-toe and use your giant greatsword. So that's what I like to do. I don't know why I'm sharing my entire life history with Final Fantasy XIV, but I guess I'm just excited that Final Fantasy's coming to Magic, so shut up, leave me alone. Next up, we've got Demon Wall, another deep cut. Absolutely love it. This one's from Final Fantasy XIV, although I believe there's one in Final Fantasy XII as well. This is a 3/3 artifact creature Demon Wall for 1 black and 1. It has Defender, it has Menace. As long as this creature has a counter on it, it can attack as though it didn't have Defender, and you can pay 1 black and 5 to put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. Everything about this card is so awesome. Like, sure, it's going to be good in Limited. You're going to play it in Limited. It's early defense that later on in the game can turn into a win condition. Awesome. That's great. It's an artifact. That's good too. But this is a 2-mana demon that works with Unholy Annex. You play this on 2, you play Unholy Annex on 3 in Standard, and you're triggering the Annex to drain for 2 that same turn, the end of turn 3, while you draw a card. We haven't had any good 2-mana demons. We just got, I think, the Rakshasa recently, which is kind of okay, but it can't block. And if you attack with it, you have to sacrifice it. There's still good ways to use that card, but I think Demon Wall might be better. It just comes down as a good defender against aggro decks, which are everywhere in Standard right now. And then the very next turn, you curve into your Unholy Annex. You start draining right away. And then maybe eventually you get some extra value out of this. But even if you don't, if your opponent has to use their removal on your crappy Demon Wall because of all the value you get out of it, you're probably feeling pretty good. So we absolutely need to try this in like a Demon Tribal deck with Unholy Annex. There are a bunch of demons coming in this set that I'm excited to give Demon Tribal another go. I think that deck's going to be a lot better. And I think Demon Wall does have a good chance of being a part of that, simply because it's a 2-mana demon that is not useless outside of the Unholy Annex. And that's the big thing you need to take into account, because the Rakshasa is also a 2-mana demon, but depending on the type of deck you're building and how you use it, sometimes the Rakshasa can be useless to you in certain situations, whereas the Demon Wall is going to come down and stop aggro in its tracks, still potentially be a threat later on. I love it. I want to try it for sure. This thing's awesome. But next up, we've got Chocoo Comet. Talk about awesome. A sorcery for 2 red and X. It deals X damage to any target, and you create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters. This token gets +1/+0 until end of turn. I love that we're getting all of these cards that do a thing and give you a 2/2 with landfall. Like, let's just make a deck that's all of those. Just all of these cards that do all these different things, but every single one of you gives you a bird. Like, Birdfall. Let's do it. I absolutely love it. The flavor's awesome. I believe this one in particular is from Final Fantasy 12. But yeah, this is just awesome. I love everything about this. Like, I don't have enough... I can't say enough good things about Chocoo Comet. Like, it's going to be a great removal spell in Limited that gives you extra value. That's going to be awesome. Is it good enough for Standard? I think if the Chocobo deck is real, I think if the Landfall deck is real, it could absolutely make the cut in Standard. But it does have to be very specifically in one of those decks. I think just an X damage and a 2/2 is a little too expensive for today's Magic and how pushed everything is. But if you're getting the extra value off of your Chocobos, off of your Landfall synergies there, because you're in a deck that can utilize those, I think a card like this could make the cut. So I'm excited to find out if I'm right about that. But at the very least, this card's going to be nuts in Limited. You probably want to use it even if you're not in the Landfall deck or in the Chocobo deck. But if you are in one of those archetypes, you absolutely want it. You do not let it pass. You first pick it, and you use it to win games. Just straight up. Next up, we've got Opera Love Song. This is perfect! I love the opera from 6, and I was so curious if they would include a card that references it. This is an instant for 1 red and 1, and you choose one. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards until your next end step, or 1 or 2 target creatures each get +2/+0 until end of turn. I kind of love this. Normally, my problem with cards that buff your team for like an Alpha Strike as like a trick to try and just win the game outright, maybe a turn earlier than you otherwise would, is that in certain situations they're not as useful and they almost feel like a wasted card if you're not able to line up the combat trick right. But with this card, you have a whole nother option. So if you're in a situation where you can't make good use of the combat trick, you can just use this for strict card advantage, right? Exile the top 2 cards, and you have until your next end step to play them. And since this is instant speed, you can play it on your opponent's turn so that you can still untap, have access to all of your mana. So no matter what, you're gonna get value off this card. So being able to ensure you get value off the thing that can also maybe just win the game for you in the right circumstance feels really good to me. I think this card is awesome, and damn it, Final Fantasy VI's Opera deserves a card that's awesome, so I'm excited about that. Next up, we've got Random Encounter, continuing to break the 4th wall. This is a sorcery for 2 red and 4. Shuffle your library, then mill 4 cards. Put each creature card milled this way onto the battlefield. They gain haste. At the beginning of the next end step, return those creatures to their owner's hand. What a cool card. It also has flashback for 2 red and 6. The only real downside to this card is you have to just chock full. You have to be chock full of creatures, because shuffling your library before you mill the 4 cards means you can't cheat things to the top and make sure you get hits. Which means if you want to make sure you get enough hits, you can't cut any corners. You just simply have to put as many creatures as possible in your deck and get that number as high as possible to make sure you're getting hits. That being said, not only do they swing in with haste that turn, they go back to your hand afterwards and give you card advantage, give you these big creatures to play, which is awesome. It's so much better than sacrificing them or exiling them. It's basically like drawing all of the creatures on the top 4 cards of your deck, except also this turn they can swing in with haste and then go back to your hand. Like, that's so much value while also giving immediate board presence. You could just win the game right away, but if you don't, you've got more things to cast over the next however many turns, and then it has flashback, so you could just do it again. There is so much value in this card, it's nuts. The only really hard part is that you can't set up the top of your deck, and you do have to get lucky and hit things, and you could potentially whiff. So you do have to make sure you're building your deck in just the right way to make this card work. But it's so much fun, man. And when this hits big, it's going to feel so good. You're going to hear shouting from across the room. I love everything about this. It's so cool. But next up is Sandworm. 1 red and 4 for a 5/4 worm with haste. When it enters, you destroy target land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. This is pretty cool. A 5 mana, 5 power haster is already kinda good, but you can use this in a couple different ways. You can destroy your opponent's land, and they have to search for a basic, and if they don't have any basics left, maybe they don't even get to search for anything. But either way, you're making them lose a color if you hit like a dual land or something like that. But you could also use this to destroy your own land so that you can search for a basic. So say you have like 7 mountains and you just don't have any blue mana and you desperately need an island, you could destroy your own mountain that you already tapped to pay for the Sandworm, and then just fetch your island, get it into play to color fix you so that you're ready to cast your blue spell next turn, while also having a 5/4 with haste that can swing in and get you value, force your opponent to contend with it, keep up with their tempo, that sort of thing. So there are some interesting ways you can use this card, and I think it's really cool. I believe this worm is from Final Fantasy V. Kind of looks like it's straight out of Dune, which is cool. But yeah, I like this card. It'll be interesting to see how good it ends up being once the set drops. Next up, we have Unexpected Request, a sorcery for 1 red and 2. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. You may attach an equipment you control to that creature. If you do, unattach it at the beginning of the next end step. So this is a threaten effect that lets you attach an equipment for free when you use it. There's a couple of cool things about this. First of all, we already saw a Zidane card, or Zidane. I don't know how you pronounce it. I always pronounced it Zidane back in the day when I played Final Fantasy IX when it first came out. But Zidane, already when you play Zidane, is basically a threaten effect. But it's a threaten effect that says whenever they gain control of something you control, you get a treasure. So after they get the thing back, if it doesn't die, the thing that you take from them was Zidane, you get a treasure off of it. But also, if you have Zidane in play and you play this other threaten effect, if again they get it back after the attack, you would get a treasure off that as well. So there's some synergy within this set that can get you extra value on a threaten effect like this. But the other thing I want to point out that I think is a lot more significant about this card is you could just use this to untap one of your creatures and equip an equipment for free. So if you have an equipment that costs an insane amount of mana to equip, you just spend 3 mana, play Unexpected Request, target a creature you already control, and then just attach your expensive equipment to it, and now you have an absolute monster, right? Not only that, but you give it haste, you untap it if it's tapped. So there is some value here in targeting your own creature, and even though I don't think that's plan A, the fact that sometimes you could be in a situation where that ends up being useful is just kind of cool, and just makes this card all that much better than it otherwise would be, just because of the versatility and how you can use it. So I think it's really cool. Next up, we've got Diamond Weapon. Man, I am so excited about this card. I hope more weapons are coming to this set. I mean, we're pretty close to the end here, so I'm worried they're not. But I'm not losing hope, because this card seems awesome, and just the idea of having weapons in this set are awesome. This is an 8/8 legendary artifact creature elemental for 2 green and 7, 9 mana, which is insane, but it costs 1 less to cast for each permanent card in your graveyard. It also has reach, and it has immune, which prevents all combat damage that will be dealt to it. This card is nuts, man. If you have 7 permanents in your graveyard, even if they're lands, they count. This comes down as a 2 mana 8/8 with reach that also cannot be dealt combat damage, prevent all of the combat damage. Like, that's crazy. It's legendary, it works in legendary decks, it's an artifact, it works with artifact decks. Like, everything about this card is so pushed and so awesome for an uncommon. This is like so close to being a rare, I feel. It's just awesome, man. Everything about this card is so spot on. For those of you that don't know, the weapons within the Final Fantasy universe are these giant kaiju-like monsters In Final Fantasy VII, they're like the protectors of the planet. When the planet feels like it's under attack, it releases these from within the planet to sort of be like a defense mechanism. They're these giant kaiju-like monsters that you have to fight, and they end up being these like secret end game, post game style bosses that you have to get all of the best stuff in the game and level up to absurd levels just to be able to beat. And they're handled a little bit differently in each of the games. I think they were first introduced in 7, and they've been used a few more times since then in different ways. In Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO, there are a few boss fights that end up being weapons, so they kind of bring them back, and it ends up being a cool thing that they do in Final Fantasy XIV, which is awesome. But these guys are just nuts, man. This card is crazy. 2 mana for this could be absolutely crazy. I think if you're in green, you pick this and you run it in limited. But I think this card even has a chance of seeing standard play, and I'm super hopeful that there are more weapons coming, because this sort of design space just feels awesome, and I love it. Let me know how you feel about it in the comments. I think it's wonderful. But next up, we've got Chocobo Racetrack, an artifact for 2 green and 3, and it has a landfall ability. Whenever a land you control enters, you create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters, this token gets +1/+0. So we're seeing even more ridiculous landfall Chocobo support. Now we have a 5 mana artifact that gives you one of those 2/2 landfall birds every single time you landfall, which is just exponentially increasing the value you're getting off of your lands. Everything about this is awesome. The Chocobo deck's going to be so real. The landfall deck's going to be so real, and I can't wait to experiment with a card like this and just see how crazy it can get. Next up, we've got Coliseum Behemoth, a 7/7 beast with trample for 2 green and 5, and when it enters, you choose one. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, or draw a card. This is another card that's really, really good. I think you probably just play this in any green deck, just because of the sheer value it has. That being said, it is really expensive, so it's going to be a lot better in like the ramp decks, the landfall decks, or whatnot, because you're going to be able to cast it a little bit earlier in the game when it's more relevant. You're going to be able to cast it more consistently, instead of maybe the game ending and you dying or your opponent dying before you ever get to 7. But even in just a normal deck, I think you could do a lot worse than to include just one of these at the top end. Because if you get there, it just provides so much value. Not only is a 7/7 trample pretty relevant as far as a body, but getting that versatility of hitting an artifact or enchantment if you absolutely need to, and then still drawing a card if you don't, just makes this guy really good. So a little expensive, I'm a little worried about that, but in the ramp deck, you absolutely run it. Next up, we've got Side Quest Raise a Chocobo, an enchantment for 1 green and 1. When it enters, you create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Even more bird fall shenanigans, I love it. At the beginning of your first main phase, if you control 4 or more birds, transform this enchantment. Okay, I have a feeling this is an auto-include in the bird decks, for sure. What does it turn into? Black Chocobo! Let's go! I love Black Chocobo. Okay, a 2/2 bird. When this permanent transforms into Black Chocobo, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle, and whenever a land you control enters, birds you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. All birds you control, not just itself. So it adds an extra stack of the normal landfall ability that buffs a bird to every bird, including itself, while already giving you a bird when you first played the side quest. 2 mana, 2/2 landfall bird that then for no mana turns into another 2/2 landfall bird, where the landfall ability is way better than the normal landfall ability because it buffs everybody, and it finds you a land, puts it straight onto the battlefield tapped when it flips, triggering that landfall ability and all of your other landfall abilities and ramping you. Everything about this card is nuts. Everything about this card is nuts. This card will 100% see play in Standard. There is definitely a Chocobo, Birdfall, Landfall deck that this is 100% seeing play in. And in fact, even outside of that deck, I think this card might be good enough. because it gives you that much value. Even if you just trade the 2/2 body it gives you at first, and then you get this extra value later on, you get to essentially search for a land with something that only costs you 2 mana and get another body. Like, everything about this is just sheer value. I love it. The Chocobo deck is going to be so real. We absolutely need to build it. This card's bananas. This card is just straight up bananas, and I love it. But next up, we've got Ring of the Luci, or Luci. I don't remember how they pronounce it in Final Fantasy 15. I forget. If you know, let me know in the comments. But this card's pretty crazy. It's a legendary artifact for 4. You can pay 2, tap it, and a life to tap target non-land permanent. So, before we get any deeper, this is basically an Icy Manipulator. Costs the same amount as an Icy Manipulator. The only downsides, it costs 1 extra mana to activate, it costs a life to activate, and it's legendary, so you can only have 1 out. So in that way, it's a slightly worse Icy Manipulator, but it's also a Soul Ring, because it can also tap to add 2 colorless mana. And that might make it worth it? This is one of those cards that helps with some of those expensive cards we saw that I'm like, maybe we put it at the top end, or maybe it's meant to be in the ramp deck, the landfall style deck or whatever. Well, this is a card that helps us add stuff like that to whatever deck. If we go from 4 to 6 and then next turn drop a land, it could be turn 5 and we're playing that 7 drop that we just saw, the Behemoth, or whatever 7 drop we want. And then even after we use it as mana for a couple turns and ramp out some huge threats, we still have this alternate ability to use with it to tap things down and, you know, to maybe be able to Alpha Strike for the win or stop their bomb from swinging in at us or whatever the case may be. So the more I think about this card, the more I like it. I think it's awesome. It is a little bit overcosted for the Icy Manipulator part of it. But the fact that you also get a Soul Ring just tacked on just cuz is amazing. So we'll have to try it and see how good it is. I have a feeling it's going to be awesome. But next up, we've got Rufus Shinra. We are on to the multicolor uncommons. He is a 2/4 legendary human noble for 3 mana in the colors of Orzhov. When he attacks, if you don't control a creature named Darkstar, you create Darkstar, a legendary 2/2 white and black dog creature token. There is so much I like about Rufus here. First of all, I just love the character. The boss fight against Rufus in Final Fantasy VII is so iconic, and they replicated it perfectly in Final Fantasy VII Remake as well. I was so surprised when I got to that boss fight. They really nailed it. Super fun. And the mechanics on the card here perfectly represent that boss fight. Creating Darkstar over and over and over, you just can't get rid of him. And it works really well mechanically for a bunch of different decks, probably mostly in Limited, certain archetypes within Limited. There is an outside chance this makes the cut in Standard though. But there's a bunch of things you can use Darkstar for, knowing that you can only have 1 Darkstar because it's legendary, but you have the opportunity to keep making them, means that you can sacrifice Darkstar to any of your sacrifice payoffs in the Sacrifice archetype or the Aristocrats archetype or whatnot, and then just make another Darkstar, which is awesome. Also, because Darkstar is a legendary, you basically get 2 legendary creatures for just 1 card here. So if you're in some sort of a Legendary Matters archetype where you have synergies for your legendary creatures, this could be really good in that as well. Darkstar can just constantly attack in, unafraid, because if they block and kill him, you can just make another one. So there's a lot of value to be had with Darkstar, and I think they went in a really interesting direction with Rufus. I'm pretty excited about this card. But next up, we've got 𝐽𝕑𝐻, King of the Dwarves from Final Fantasy IV. He is a 1/1 legendary dwarf noble with double strike for just 2 mana in the colors of Boros, which is already almost good enough, right? But also, whenever 𝐽𝕑𝐻 or another dwarf you control enters, and whenever an equipment you control enters, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. So it's got this free rummage ability to just dig, 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 fill up your graveyard potentially with value. And because he wants to be in an equipment deck, that just makes him even better for being as low costed as possible and having double strike. Much, much better than if he had a slightly bigger body but cost 3 or even 4. Getting him down for only 2 mana and having him be as small as possible so that you can get him down for only 2 mana and you've got that double strike on a body ready to use by just equipping all of your equipment to him. and getting basically double the value out of your power buffs on your equipment seems awesome to me. And even in like maybe like the prowess style decks that are popular in standard right now, just having a 2-mana double striker that you can start using your instant speed buffs on and get even more value out of. Things like Monstrous Rage feel really, really scary with a card like this. So I think there's a lot of ways. I think the dogs agree. They're also excited. Double striking dogs. But I do feel... You good? You calm? You cool? Okay. I do feel like 𝐽𝕝 is pretty awesome. But that brings us to our next card, Cloud of Bow. You need to hush. The people can't hear. You need to be polite. It's called Stream Etiquette. Cloud of Darkness is a 3/3 legendary creature avatar with flying for 2 green, 1 black, and 2. So 5 total mana. It also has the Particle Beam ability. When Cloud of Darkness enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. I love everything about this. This is a flying Flametongue Kavoo, guys. This is everything that I want. This is going to be great in Limited, but it might even make the cut in Standard. Maybe it doesn't make the cut in Standard. Maybe I just like the kind of card it is so much that I'm over-evaluating it. Maybe take a step back and calm down. But I love this. If you're in the right deck where you're just going to have a bunch of permanents in your graveyard, just nukes whatever and gives you a flying body, yeah, I love everything about this card. Also, I'm pretty sure the full name in Final Fantasy III is Famfrit Cloud of Darkness, if I remember correctly. If you know, let me know in the comments. I'm pretty sure that's what her name is. But very, very cool card. It really is the closest that we've gotten to like a Flametongue Kavoo or a Ravenous Chupacabra style card in a long time. And I absolutely love those kinds of cards, you know, making copies to trigger the ETB ability again, or flickering to trigger the ETB ability again. All of that is super fun. I love messing around with those sorts of shenanigans when I'm deck building. I'm going to have a blast with this. At the very least, I'm going to have a blast with this in Limited. It's going to be really, really good in Limited. If you're in Golgari, definitely snatch this thing up. Getting a 2-for-1 that could potentially nuke your opponent's best body and also give you a flying body, a relevant flying body that can swing in with evasion and maybe just win the game, is super good. Flying is so good in Limited. The fact that you get this Ravenous Chupacabra style ability on a flyer is kind of crazy to me. I love this card. If you're in Golgari, grab it and play it. Do not let it pass because it will not table. Next up is our first rare of the day. We're almost there, guys. We're almost done. We've just got a few cards left. This is Minwu White Mage from Final Fantasy II. He's a 3/3 legendary human cleric for 2 white and 3. He has Vigilance, he has Lifelink, and whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on each cleric you control. The jury's really out on how good this card is. Obviously, it'll be great in Limited, but it's a rare, so you're not going to see it very much in Limited. The fact that it puts a +1/+1 counter on every cleric and not just on one creature makes me think that maybe it's worth the 5 mana. 5 mana is a lot in Standard. It's really hard to know if it's going to make the cut. Normally when you have a 5 mana creature, in order for it to be relevant in Standard, you need immediate value that it provides, so that if your opponent then just kills it right away before you ever get to use it, you have some kind of leftover value that it was worth investing the 5 mana. This doesn't really give you that unless you have ways of getting life gain triggers the same turn that you play it. And there are potentially, if you have some creatures in play that gain you a life whenever a creature enters, you could play Minwu, trigger those abilities, put counters on all of your clerics, and then even if they kill Minwu, you still have that leftover value, and that could be relevant. And then obviously if they don't kill Minwu, he's really good because he gets the counters as well, being a cleric, and he has Vigilance and Lifelink, so he'll be able to attack in and block, gain life on both of those combat scenarios, and that's actually a ton of value the more you think about it. So I think the combination of Vigilance and Lifelink and buffing the whole team, including himself, is pretty good for 5 mana. I still worry about making sure you get enough value the turn that you play him so that, you know, if your opponent does have spot removal and takes him out right away, you're not behind on tempo spending 5 mana on a dude that they only had to spend like 2 mana to kill. But there's definitely potential for this card to be nuts in life gain decks, and I'm excited to find out. But next up, we've got Memories Returning. I think this card is absolutely bananas. 2 blue and 2 for a sorcery. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, then choose an opponent. They put one on the bottom of your library, then you put one into your hand, then they put one on the bottom, and then you put the last one into your hand. So you basically draw 3 cards for 4 mana, but you also get to pick the best card from the top 5 and have card selection. So you get the best card from the top 5 and 2 other cards, but you do have a little bit of selection for the rest of the cards in the process, which is kind of interesting. Also, if you're playing this in a deck that cares about the graveyard, you could potentially put your opponent in a difficult situation where they're screwed if they do, screwed if they don't, where no matter what they put in the graveyard, maybe it's something with flashback or something you can get value off being in the graveyard, and you can get more value out of this card. But even just being like this weird fact or fiction that gives you card selection is just really interesting. And then the fact that it has flashback for 2 blue and 7 is just what really pushes it over the edge. You can do it all over again later on in the game, and even though 9 mana is so much, that's so expensive, if you view it as just extra, just there in case the game drags out forever, it actually ends up being super good as just extra. It also reminds me of, what was that other 4 mana? It was a 4 mana spell that looked at a number of cards from the top of your library equal to the mana you spent to cast it and put 2 into your hand. And then it also had a flashback cost. It rotated out last rotation. I don't remember the name of it, but that was everywhere in control decks. And this feels like almost a new version of that. The only real difference is you get more cards out of this, but it's a sorcery. So it's probably not as good because it's not instant speed. You can't hold up interaction and then just cast it if you don't have to use the interaction. You have to commit to this on your turn, but it is still a lot of value and some really good card selection, and I feel like this card's going to be nuts. Even without the flashback, I feel like it's pretty good, but with the flashback, I just feel like this card's bananas. Let me know in the comments how you feel about that. But that brings us to the last card of the day, the last rare. This is my boy, Seifer Almasy, a 3/4 legendary creature human knight for 1 red and 3. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains double strike until end of turn, which is the same ability that Squall has, I believe. Squall being an Orzhov card in black and white. He also has the Fire Cross ability. Whenever Seifer Almasy deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell will be put into your graveyard this turn, you exile it instead. This is very similar to Squall's ability, except instead of finding an instant or sorcery, Squall finds a non-creature permanent. So they are kind of 2 sides to the same coin. They both have a way to give double strike to a creature that attacks alone, which means theoretically you could have 8 cards in your deck that are able to willy-nilly just hand out double strike if a creature attacks alone, which is nuts. But then you could also have access to, you know, depending on the deck you're in, this ability to bring back either instants or sorceries or non-creature permanents. And what's awesome about that too is if he gives double strike to himself, he will hit twice if he gets through for combat damage, which means he'll trigger the Fire Cross ability twice, and you'll get to pull 2 instants or sorceries out of your graveyard with 3 or less cost, which is kind of crazy. He's also 2 very relevant creature types. Human Tribal is super important right now, and him being a knight is very relevant within this set. It's probably one of the most important creature types in this set that we've seen so far, which I pointed out earlier in this video already. So everything about this card is awesome. I kind of want to build like a Mardu deck that uses both Seifer and Squall. But then again, their abilities that trigger off combat damage want very different things. So do you end up spreading yourself too thin? it's hard to say. What I can say is that when I was in 12th grade, my senior year of high school, I actually dressed up as this guy for Halloween, and it was kind of wild. I spray painted all of the iconography on a trench coat, and I made a gun blade by like buying like a revolver, a toy revolver from like Walmart or something, and I used some cardboard that I cut out that I bent over the revolver in the shape of a sword and used like tinfoil on it or something. I don't remember. It was a wild time though. That was years ago. Man, good memories. But I did dress up as Seifer once for Halloween. That happened, and that was pretty nuts. So I'm glad to see a card like this. I'm glad that Seifer is represented in the game. And man, I'm just really excited about this set. It's looking really sweet. But that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for bearing with me through all of this. It's been a metric ton of spoilers to go through. We are getting towards the end of spoiler season. We've only got a few days left, and there are some juicy ones on the way, I feel, because I know there are some rares that we still need to see. I was number crunching with my editor earlier today, trying to figure out what could be left to spoil, and it does seem like there are some pretty interesting possibilities still left to spoil for this set. So look forward to more spoiler videos coming soon. Also, my top 10 of the set video and the 10 decks I'm excited to brew video. All of that stuff is on the way, not to mention some pretty crazy deck techs. And make sure you are here for early access. I'll be doing a 24-hour stream, doing nothing but building decks with Final Fantasy cards on Arena and running them against other content creators days before the rest of you guys get access to playing with the cards on Arena. Super looking forward to that, and those decks will start dropping every single day on the channel, starting with the day that early access happens. What day is that? I'll have that information for you very, very soon, but it's coming up quick. I'm super excited about it, and I'll see you then. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.